Okay, so first news topic of the week. I'm actually going to be recording this one out of order with the rest of the Direct. It's the Battlefield 6 open beta. It's continued over this weekend, and the reason we are recording it out of sequence is so we can actually play it for a bit. The Direct is typically recorded on a Friday morning. So yes, obviously Oliver's done a great deal of work on the console versions of the game. That video is already out there, and I think it sort of establishes that Battlefield 6 is a force to be reckoned with in many ways. What we didn't look at so far was the PC version of the game, or the beta rather, because Alex is away. And I thought I would take a very, very quick look at it and give you some impressions on what I thought of it. And Oliver, after that, you're going to be talking about the new map that's been added.
I am.
Which should be quite interesting. Let's get into the PC version first. Let's talk about settings first of all, those all-important settings. I think what's quite interesting about this one, Oliver, is that there seems to be a push from DICE to kind of give you console equivalent settings out of the box, which I certainly found a bit interesting. You've got balanced and performance modes, and there are behaviors between them which seem to be very common with the console versions, like balanced locking you to 60 frames per second with VSync, performance unlocking, but you can of course change the VSync setting to off. So you can use the balanced mode with VSync off if you prefer. That's an odd decision. I wonder what you make of it.
Well, it certainly does suggest there's some homogeneity between the PC approach and the console approach there. In consoles, you're looking at a balanced mode by default, and you get this like high performance mode that you can engage on every console but the Series S, I believe, where you basically get, it seems like pretty similar visual settings to the balanced mode, but you get that frame rate unlock, and indeed without VRR, you get that VSync unlock as well. You get the return of tearing, which is not so flattering there. But on PC, it's kind of a dense settings menu. There are a lot of sub-menus to it, right? You have to go through advanced settings, and there's a different section for the display output. There are some confusing things, like I know we were talking over the weekend. They use a resolution scale as a 1% in their display options. And then also separately have quality levels for the upscaler, which is kind of confusing, right? So you'd assume, okay, well, maybe the percentage overrides the quality levels for the upscaler, but no, it's totally different. The percentage just sets the output percentage of screen resolution, after which it does like a naive spatial upscale. And then the internal resolution is set by the FSR, DLSS, or XeSS quality sliders. It's just very confusing. It's conceptually a confusing menu. It's a dense menu. It's a hard one to get through. And ultimately, the visual settings that you do configure, I think we'll find out that actually you can probably run the game at pretty high settings. You don't need to worry about them too much while still maintaining good performance.
Yeah, the settings menu. So obviously you have like that sort of global resolution scale there, and then you are able to sort of set DLSS to performance quality, the standards, right? So I guess the point is that the footage here I've got of the Ryzen 5 3600 with the 5060 Ti, I actually I'm saying it's 1440p here, but it is actually a 4K capture at 67% resolution scale with the DLSS factor at whatever it is there. So yeah, it's kind of it's very interesting sort of scenario there. But ultimately, I think it's kind of cool that it gives you that that sort of ability to have like double scaling, as it were, because DLSS, any sort of upscaler has a computational cost. You can lower that cost and then sort of upscale to final display output resolution there. So that's pretty cool. But I think a lot of people may be slightly confused because the stuff that is a traditional PC graphics menu is kind of hidden away under the advanced options that you've got there. So you have to dig deep, perhaps too deep, to find that stuff. But let's talk about PC performance because, we lauded the console versions, right? And I think there is a lot to give DICE credit for on this. I'm going to talk first of all about the Ryzen 5 3600 with the 5060 Ti. It's a 16 gig model. It's kind of like ballpark what a PS5 Pro is like from GPU and CPU resources. And pretty much all always above 70 frames, pretty much always above 60 frames per second, rather. But obviously, that's a bit of a blanket statement because there are various levels with varying levels of complexity. Cairo seems to be pretty heavy. That's where you're in your sort of 70s there. What you'll note, though, which I found quite interesting, is the frame time graph on the bottom right there. It's quite spiky. I realized that the millisecond range there, 0 to 40 milliseconds, is quite tight. But you can see that it's pretty spiky there, which kind of says to me that there's a CPU limitation in effect there with that 3600, which kind of makes sense. I guess it is a very old CPU at this point. We just keep it around mostly for console equivalents and also because AMD shifted untold millions of them. There's a lot of 3600s out there. But yeah, high settings, balance settings. I use DLSS balance mode at 1440p, and I'd say the experience was pretty great overall. Actually, I was quite impressed with what a relatively mediocre CPU could do here. GPU's probably being underfed. I should have really find time to put in the 4060, but I think this pretty much gives you an idea of the lie of the land on what is like a mid-range system, low to mid-range system, I think, at this point. So, yeah, I mean, no stutters, I guess, was the other thing. And maybe one stutter. But the thing about PC gaming is that if you're gaming for hours and you encounter a stutter, there's a very good possibility it's not actually your PC, or rather not actually the game doing that, but rather some sort of background task that your PC has suddenly decided to kick in. The overview map actually seems to be quite CPU intensive, which I found quite interesting. But that's the lie of the land for the 3600 there. Obviously, the different levels, different performance levels. The Liberation Peak level is actually significantly less heavy, and there the frame times are kind of like more what I consider to be sort of GPU limited. They're much flatter, not quite as spiky. So pretty good, and I guess probably in line with what you were looking at on consoles, by and large. Pretty impressive show overall, I think. I'd say this is looking really, really impressive, and I kind of get what you're saying when you said that it's kind of shippable in this state already. Certainly the multiplayer that we've had access to is pretty cool, right? I was really had a good time with it. Totally hopeless at the game, of course, but it's quite a spectacle. I wanted to talk quickly also about the high-end experience. So I used my test system, 9800X3D with an RTX 5090, and I just ran 4K DLLA because why wouldn't you? And yeah, basically usually above 120 frames per second there, just fully tapped out. Obviously, that will change according to content. Because the nature of multiplayer games is that it's going to be quite heavy. Switching things over to DLSS quality mode, though, obviously that does give you an appreciable frame rate increase, but I wasn't actually running anything like Riva Tuner or anything while this was running. But I kind of guessed that the CPU was doing a lot more work because my CPU cooler actually spooled up. Yeah. But even so, what I found quite interesting about that is that with the 9800X3D, the frame times were still pretty good there. So even if we are kind of seeing a mixture of being CPU and GPU limited there, frame times were still great, still no stutter, obviously. I'm really excited by this. I think this is pretty good going. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do a sort of big in-depth look at the PC version. I mean, it's looking pretty good from what I'm seeing so far, based on like a lower end system and a higher end system. Notoriously difficult to benchmark a multiplayer game, of course, because it's so dynamic. I think the only way you could really do head to heads is if you've got two people on two different PCs in the same instance. That would kind of normalize load. But beyond that, yeah, I'm very, very excited by this. But let's talk about the new level.
Yeah, we should talk about the new level because I think this is interesting. I've seen a very wide spectrum of reactions, I should say, to the game's overall presentation, to this beta overall, but certainly the game's presentation especially, because a lot of people are really clamoring for this kind of super lightweight experience that can run at a really fast clip on all systems. And other players are a little bit disappointed in the absence of ray tracing or virtual shadow maps or virtualized geometry systems or what have you. Basically, this kind of cavalcade of current gen features here. And this new map is kind of a good testing ground for those technologies a little bit, and kind of some of the advantages and disadvantages perhaps of DICE's approach here. So the map itself is quite exciting. It's called Empire State, set in Brooklyn. And we'll say the Rush variant seems a little bit imbalanced, but they seem to be tuning that moment to moment by changing the MCOM timings, 30 seconds to 45 seconds back and forth, doing a number of different kind of variants in the mix there to try to get it into a good level of balance there for attackers and defenders. But I found it an overall quite good map to just play moment to moment. And it does look quite good, I would say, in the kind of exterior shots. Looks pretty all right there, I would say. Nothing extraordinary, but like it looks visually dense. It reads in a pleasing manner. It's got that kind of sunset tone. It looks quite nice. But then I think you go into kind of interior areas and you start to see a little bit more, some of the elements that I think people are complaining about a little bit with this title. Like some of the interior areas are very boxy and geometric, and they remind me of like Operation Locker and Battlefield 4 in like 2013, where you just have these really boxy areas which don't look very pleasing. They look very simple, and they don't really look like real world locations in the same way that some of the exteriors really sell as real world locations, as true to life things. Also, in a lot of the interiors, you're seeing non-shadow casting lights. You're going into a diner, you're seeing like tables, chairs, whatever, not casting any shadows, totally just sitting in place with a light bleeding through them, and it does not look very appealing at all there. Looks very last generation, I'd say, in a lot of those respects, which is unfortunate. And then also you have these screen space reflections. Now, in some instances, I think they look okay, but they do look very artifact prone when you're actually moving the camera around. Lots of noise in them. When there's like bits of, things flowing through the air, things like papers and other detritus, that gets in the way and creates these ugly occlusion holes in the SSR in a way that I think we've seen very prominently in other Battlefield titles, especially in Battlefield 2042. This had a very bad tendency to do this, and we're certainly seeing some of that behavior here. So I think like this is a game where maybe certain kinds of environments really show off this game at its best. In some of the other, like Siege of Cairo, some of the other maps we've seen in the game, I think they have like more diffuse surfaces. They have a lot of props in the scene, very dense environments, not too many like interior spaces, large interior spaces where the GI kind of falls apart and where maybe you get that nasty SSR treatment.
Right.
But yeah, I think there is basically a bit of a tale of two halves with this game, where sometimes it looks, I would say, really good, and it's still very light and it's very appealing, and you're really feeling it. And then in some other scenarios where you're dealing with some of these more complex lighting scenarios, or maybe just in some interiors where the geometry is not too pleasing, where the model density is not too pleasing, and you are noticing like this feels a little bit more like an older Battlefield game in some ways that are maybe not too appealing, and then you kind of get a little bit upset there's not ray traced reflections in the mix or something. Right. But yeah, just kind of a bit of a reflection there. I think overall it's still a very positive story from this beta. Like I've seen a lot of very positive feedback on the gameplay, a lot of very positive feedback on weapon balancing, classes, things like this. But the visual presentation I think will probably be a sticking point for some time to come with this title, although I think there are some very positive elements. Like you mentioned, performance is superb. In general, the game looks very good. Consoles are in totally shippable state. Like I would agree with that totally. So we'll have to see for the final release, and we'll also have to see like if the campaign changes things up in any meaningful sense, if the graphics might be improved there, if they might throw in some unexpected visual features we aren't necessarily seeing in this early preview. But yeah, just a couple thoughts there. I think this new map is like not quite as flattering basically to the game's overall aesthetic as the other ones that are in this package.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't played this before. This was my first time with Battlefield 6. And I have to say that I get exactly what you're saying, because it's kind of like a really unkind way of describing it would be to say it's a throwback. But I think it's a throwback in the right way, in that they've gone back and basically recaptured the essence of Battlefield. But I don't think they've... that there was always like an association between DICE and absolute cutting edge visuals, right? Mm-hmm. And this isn't what what we're getting this time around. We're not getting like super high-end visuals. What you are getting is like the essence of Battlefield, brought kicking and screaming back to today with destruction ramped up to the max. And it's a really fantastic experience, right? And I think in the gameplay stakes, they've actually nailed it. But it's not a technological showcase in the way you might have been hoping for, I think. But I still think that it's going to be a massive, massive hit simply because I think it's delivering what people want, right, from Battlefield. They want that. They want that differentiation from Call of Duty. They want this total destruction. They want those big open areas with a lot going on. They want the sense that anything could happen at any point, which I think they've beautifully captured, because there's some crazy stuff that could happen at any given point. So, kudos to DICE, I think, and the various other studios that seem to be involved. Maybe we need to wait for the next one until we get, the next level in visuals. But, I think they've really whetted our appetites in an extremely compelling manner for this one. And looking forward to see what they come up with. Any final thoughts before we move on?
Not too much. Just to say it was kind of hard to capture the footage for this video because I was playing HUDless. That was a big detractor to my kill-death ratio. Unfortunately, very challenging to play this game at any level of efficacy when you can't even identify friend from foe here. But no. Other than that, I've had some fun with it. I've been playing it with some friends as well over the weekend. It is that kind of classic Battlefield experience. They are bringing back like that modern military setting, that destruction system, the traditional class structure, defibrillators, like all these elements that people like in Battlefield games. It's basically all back here. Not a lot of new elements, though, like the Behemoth system, I believe, in Battlefield 1, where you had like these zeppelins and trains and boats and crazy things going on with these gigantic ships and nutty things. And that famous, like, if you blew up the zeppelin and it would come down and it'd be all fiery and it would cause a lot of destruction and explosions and stuff like that. That was really fun. Like, there are definitely some elements of those earlier titles that I miss in terms of these kind of signature gimmicks. Not to downplay them, but like signature gimmicks like Levolution, like the Behemoth system. That's not really present here. It really feels like a return to, if anything, like a Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4 kind of experience. That kind of thing is going on here. But yeah, broadly speaking, I've seen only really positive opinions about at least the gameplay structure, balance, maps, things like that. It's been pretty positive so far. So I think they have definitely a hit cooking up here. I heard some reporting that EA might be expecting 100 million players, 100 million copies. I think that's maybe possibly unrealistic, but I think they have a hit on their hands for sure here.
Wow, 100 million. Yeah, okay. Well, I guess we have to wait few months now until we actually see the final game, but obviously really looking forward to it.